So this is our exercising with poles class, and we are using walking poles or Nordic poles or whatever poles you've got at home. If you don't have poles, you can also use umbrellas or sticks or whatever it is that you've got to help facilitate some stability with your balance during the class. Now I'm using the activator pole from Urban Pulling. Some of you may have this, some of you may not, but any poles will work. If you've got ski poles that you're using, just be careful that the little pointy bit at the end doesn't damage your floor or cause you to slip during the class. But otherwise, you can feel free to use any poles that you've got. Now, the way the class will work is we are going to start in a seated position, a little bit of a seated warm-up, and then we'll move on to a standing position for the remainder of the class. It'll be very similar to what we did last week. For those who were here last week, you'll remember that we started with that seated position, went up into our standing position, and we did exercises in both seated and standing. And for those who are new today, welcome. You just need a pair of poles or sticks or whatever you've got at home, and that is all you need. Other than that, just a chair that you can sit in to start off the class with, and then we'll kind of move on from there. Now, before we get into our exercise today, I want to talk a little bit about the height of your poles. So if you have adjustable poles at home, when we're doing the class today, I want you to think about maintaining your elbow at around 90 degrees when you're holding on to the handle of the pole. So I actually lowered my poles a little bit because we'll be seated first. But for example, you see how I'm holding on to the pole. You see how my arm is roughly at 90 degrees. When I stand up, I would have to raise the pole slightly so that I maintain as close to 90 degrees as possible in the elbow. So just be a little bit mindful. You might need to adjust your height as we move from a seated to a standing position. And the reason we want the arm to be roughly at 90 degrees is just so that way we don't end up going to, we want to be in a neutral range essentially, because as we move along the class, we'll be moving into other ranges, but we want to kind of maintain our wrist at a relatively neutral range. Okay, I've just let somebody else in from the waiting room, so I want to make sure that we've got audio connected. Okay, wonderful. Okay, I think that's enough talking from me. I'll just make sure my screen is set up. Okay, let's get going. So I'm going to start sitting in my chair. For those who just came in case we didn't hear, I was mentioning that if you've got adjustable poles, we want to make sure our arm is roughly at about 90 degrees. Oops, somebody else in the waiting room here. So our poles will need to be slightly lower as we're sitting versus when we're standing. Okay, before we start, I'm going to try sideways. Oops, big squeak from the chair. Now, if you have a look at my sitting position for a second, what I don't want is for us to be sitting all the way at the back of the chair and resting into the chair. We don't want to be in this position because our center of gravity is really far behind our base of support. And because our leg is mostly resting on the seat of the chair, it's actually very difficult for us to move and engage our body. And so before we do anything today, I want you to check in with what your sitting position is like. And I want you to sit upright, having your shoulders over your hips, and to move yourself to the front of the chair so that your feet are flat on the floor and you're kind of in this ready, engaged position. So just check in with your posture, make sure we're not sitting or slouching back in the chair. We want to be sitting upright so our shoulders are over our hips. And we want to have both feet flat on the floor. Okay, so to start with, we're just going to hold our poles out to the side, and you'll notice that in the video here, you can see that my pole is vertical to the floor. Can you see that? So my pole is not on a slope or an angle, but it's completely vertical to the floor, so it's perpendicular to the floor. And what we're going to start with here is we are going to start with our 4-point grounding. So same as what we did last time. we're going to press all 10 toes into the floor and press your heels into the floor at the same time. And you're going to imagine you're growing roots deep into the earth from the soles of your feet. It's almost like your feet and legs are heavy, 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 and you're pressing an imprint into the floor with your feet. Maintaining this engagement, we're going to now think about our arms. We're holding onto the pole, and I want you to imagine both arms have gotten very heavy, almost like the gravity in the room has gone heavier, and it's weighing the entire length of the arms down. So you're pressing down into the poles, not just with the wrist, but with the entire arm. You're pressing the entire length of the arm. You're pressing down into the ground such that your head grows a little bit taller towards the ceiling. And this is our 4-point grounding here, whereby both ends of the poles are sinking deep into the ground, and both soles of the feet sinking deep into the ground. It's almost like we're thinking we're nice and heavy and we're connected to the earth, connected to the ground. And at all times during our class, this is what I want you to think about. We don't want to think up and up for balance. We actually want to think pressing down into the floor in order to stand taller, in order to balance taller. And this applies to when you're walking with poles or without poles as well. We want to think pressing down into the ground in order to grow taller with our posture. And from here, maintaining our 4-point grounding, we're going to go into a little bit of a weight shifting. So I'm shifting my weight forward and back in this chair, and your poles will naturally move, so you don't have to really think about where your poles are going. You're shifting your weight forward and back. And you're maintaining your 4-point grounding as you do this. You're thinking about your feet heavy into the ground, the entire length of the arms pressing down into the pole, heavy weight into the ground. And because you're pressing down into the ground, you're sitting up nice and tall. You're thinking pressing down to grow taller as you weight shift forward and back. Keep going. I'm just letting somebody in from the waiting room. Keep going. You're thinking about shifting that weight, growing taller. Oh, I've got a comment that my voice isn't very clear today, so I'll talk a little louder. And now let's take this into a different position. We're going to now go sideways. We're going to weight shift side to side. And while we're weight shifting, you're really thinking about your pelvis being heavy on the seat. It's almost like if you've got a pressure cushion that you're sitting on, you're kind of squeezing the cushion on one side and then squeezing the cushion on the other. And your poles will naturally move as we're weight shifting, but we're not really going to think about moving them. Specifically, just let them move however they want as you're weight shifting from side to side. And you're really, oops, I'm just going to mute someone here. And you're really thinking about maintaining that 4-point grounding we talked about earlier. The entire length of the arm is pressing down into the poles, and the soles of the feet are sinking deep into the ground. Nicely done. And now let's come back to center. We're maintaining our 4-point grounding, thinking about the soles of our feet digging deep into the ground, the entire length of the arms pressing into the poles, and we're going to start moving the poles forward and back. And as we're doing this, I don't want to see any poles lift off the ground. We're really thinking about that grounding, like you're almost grinding the bottom of the poles deeper into the ground, not just by your wrist, but by the entire length of the arms. So you might start to feel a little bit of achiness into your arms because we're engaging those muscles at the bottom and perhaps onto the side of your trunk too. You're thinking about maintaining the 4-point grounding, both soles of the feet, digging deep into the ground, the bottom of the pose, digging deep into the ground. You're thinking about the entire length of the arms, pressing down into the poles as you do this push-pull movement with the arms, breathing as you're doing this. And when you're ready, we're going to add in the legs. We're going to pedal our feet such that you have one heel come up the floor, one at a time. Thinking about pressing down into the pole with the entire length of the arms. So you're pressing down into the floor in order to sit taller, pressing the entire length of the arms into the pole in order to extend the crown of your head towards the ceiling. Nicely done. Let's go for 10. Pressing down into the poles. 9, 8, growing taller. 7, 6, press down to grow taller. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and rest. Bring the poles in together such that the poles are touching. And you might want to walk your feet out a tiny bit wider for some stability. And you can lace the fingers together so that you're holding onto the poles together, or you can have them separate, whatever is more comfortable for you. And again, we're making sure our poles are perpendicular to the ground, so don't have your poles be on an angle like that. We want them to be perpendicular to the ground. And from here, we're going to lean our trunks forward and stretch those arms forward. If I turn sideways, you can see my poles start perpendicular to the ground, and I'm leaning forward. Can you see that? I'm leaning from my hips. I'm not doing this. I'm not arching from the back. I'm keeping the spine nice and long, and I'm hinging at the hips. And I'm keeping my arms relatively straight, and I'm essentially moving my trunk forward and back from the hips, and therefore the poles are moving as well. Can you see? So it's almost like your poles are like a big lever or a big, I can't find the word for it, but they're like a big lever, and you're trying to move the entire length forward and back. And as we're doing this movement, remember we're still maintaining that 4-point grounding. So you want to think heavy feet into the floor. Our feet are heavy, pressing our imprint into the floor. And the entire length of the arms are still pressing down into the poles, such that the bottom of the poles are also digging deep into the ground. Nicely done. Keep going. Breathing as you're doing this. I'm going to turn back to facing. Keep going. And now let's try to see if we can do a circle this time. We're thinking about still maintaining that length in our spine, and we're hinging from the hips. The movement is coming from the hips. So we're not, if I turn sideways, we're not doing this, right? We don't want the back to be doing this. I'm exaggerating. No one's doing it like that, but we want to lengthen the spine. And can you see how the movement is coming from the hips? Can you see that? So my spine is nice and long, and I'm drawing a big circle with my arms, almost like you're stirring a big cauldron in the spirit of Halloween. And we're still thinking about that 4-point grounding. We don't want the poles to be lifting off. We won't want the feet to be lifting off either. We want all 4 points to be pressing down into the ground as we're doing this. Let's go in the other direction with that circle. So go in the other direction. The same thing. You're thinking about drawing that big circle or stirring that big quadrant. And you want your spine to be relatively straight and long, and the movement is coming from the hips. Pressing all 4 points the two poles and your feet down into the ground. And now let's come back to the middle. We're going to hold on to the poles separately now, but we still want the poles to be together at the bottom. And we're going to add those two things together now. So we're going to lean forward. And we're going to come back up and circle the arms back up. So we're pushing ourselves forward, and then we're circling to come up. And so we're putting together the two movements we just did. And so you want to maintain the technique here. You're thinking about pressing both poles and both feet deep into the earth. And we're keeping our spine as long as we can. We're hinging from the hips. Hinging from the hips to lean forward. And then drawing big circles back to sit back up. Breathing as you do this. Nice long spine. So even though we're leaning forward and coming back, we're still thinking about lengthening through the spine. You're thinking pressing down into the floor in order to grow taller. Keep going. I'm just going to turn sideways so you can see me. So you're lengthening that spine the entire time. Keep going. I'm just letting somebody in from the waiting room. Keep going. So lengthening that spine. Let's go for 5. Last 4. Think about the 4-point grounding. 3, pressing the poles into the ground. 2. Last 1. And coming back up, nicely done, and rest for a second. Okay. We're now going to put one pole onto the floor, and we're going to just hold on to one pole here at about shoulder width apart. So you can see my arms are roughly shoulder width apart. And we're going to hold the poles out in front of us like so, ideally at shoulder height, but you can go a little bit lower if you like. And we're going to try to do a march here, seated march, and you're going to try to bring your knee up towards that pole as much as you can. You might have to lean back a little bit in order to clear the leg, but what I don't want to see, if I do it sideways, what I don't want to see is this. I don't want to see us leaning into the chair, but you can see in order to hike that knee up, we might have to lean back slightly. So you're using your tummy muscles. We're not going to lean back into the chair, but we're just leaning back slightly from where we're sitting, but not actually touching the backrest. Keep going. Whoops. Big sweep from the chair here. Big lift of those knees if you can. Nice long spine. You're still thinking about growing tall. Crown of the head reaching towards the ceiling. Last 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and rest. This time, we're going to hold the stick up in front of us like so, but maybe go a little bit wider. So a bit wider than your shoulder. Keep pressing into the ground. We're going to go into a little bit of a rotation. So it's almost like if you've got a little table and you're using your pole to dust that table. So you're sliding, you're thinking about sliding the pole horizontally side to side, or almost like you're trying to touch someone behind you, poke someone with your stick behind you. You're rotating, pressing the feet into the ground. I don't want to see anyone's legs come off, so you don't want to have that leg come off as you rotate. You want to keep the feet digging into the ground. Keep going. I'm just letting somebody else in from the waiting room. Keep going, keep going. And as you're rotating, you're making sure that we're not just like this, right? We don't want just the arms to go. We want your breastbone to also move. So see how my breastbone is also moving with my arms here? So you don't want just the arms, you want the entire trunk to be rotating as well. Nicely done. Oh, I see a big fly flying across the camera, so you might see it every now and then. Good, nicely done. And rest your arms. Okay, we're now going to go even wider with our grip. So all the way to the ends of the poles if you can. And now we're going to go from one side all the way up and over to the other side. So we're doing a big stretch up and over. If this is hurting your shoulders, maybe go a little bit lower, but we still want to imagine you're kind of drawing a big rainbow with your pole. And as we're doing this, remember, it's not just the arms. I don't want to see this. I want the breastbone to move, like you're drawing a rainbow with the breastbone. Good, nicely done. Keep going, everyone, nicely done. Last 4, 3, 2, 1, and rest. Okay, now we're going to move into our sit-to stands. So we might want to adjust the height of our poles a tiny bit. It doesn't have to be exact because we can adjust them again once we're standing. But I'm going to invite you, if you have adjustable poles, to now adjust them a little bit higher, a couple of notches longer. So that when we stand up, we're well supported. Excuse the squeaking of the chair. Sounds terrible. Okay. Now, before we stand, we're going to practice our sit-to stands for a second. Now, last week I had talked about how in order to make sit-to stands more efficient, we really want to concentrate on our weight shift. So if I lose my poles for a second, a lot of the times when I see people stand, I see people start at the back of their chair, and then you end up trying to stand like this. And because your weight is so far back behind your base of support, it's near impossible to get up. And so people end up having to pull themselves up with something in front of them or pushing their legs into the back of the chair to stand. And we don't want to do that. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to make sure we're sitting at the front of our chair. Can you see? So I'm not sitting all the way back. I'm sitting as forward as I can in order to get my center of gravity, i.e. the hips, as close to my base of support, i.e. the feet, as possible. And then from here, we're going to engage those muscles we used earlier in order to bring our chest forward. So remember we did a lot of these at the beginning, so this is where it comes in handy. We're going to lean forward such that we're bringing our center of gravity over our base of support, and then we're going to push the floor away from us to stand once our center of gravity is on top of our base of support. And then to sit down, exactly the same. I'm going to stick my bottom back, but I'm keeping my chest forward in order to keep my center of gravity on top of my base of support to then sit back down. So when we do our sit-to stands, we're going to go nice and slow. Now, if you're not comfortable using the poles, you can drop them and use your chair instead, whatever works for you. If it hurts your shoulders with the poles, maybe go a little lower with the poles, so adjust the height lower. But we kind of have it in a slightly higher angle because we want to facilitate our posture once we stand. So join me here if you haven't already. You're thinking about leaning forward to get your center of gravity as close to your base of support as possible in order to stand all the way up. And you're thinking about pushing the floor away in order to stand tall. And then same thing in reverse, sticking your bottom back, chest forward in order to sit. And you're thinking about long necks the entire time. Bring your center of gravity forward to stand. Stick your bottom back, chest forward to sit. Nicely done. And you're pressing down into the poles to help facilitate the upwards extension. Good. Let's see if we can do 3 more here. In your own time, it doesn't have to match my speed. Just do whatever feels comfortable for you. I've got 2 more here. You're really thinking about bringing your weight over your base of support. Nicely done. And then on your last one, You're going to remain standing and we'll move the chair away, but take your time. There's no rush. If you need some water, you can feel free to grab some as well. Last week I had a terrible cough because I got a nasty virus from my daughter from daycare, and I'm sad to say this week I'm still sick, but a little bit better. So let's frog-like with my voice. Okay. So we are going to start by making sure our poles are the right height. So if you look at my arms for a second, you can see my elbow is at 90 degrees. So if your pole is too high, you're going to breach that 90 degrees. And if your pole is too low, your arm will be straighter than 90 degrees. So I want you to just check the height of your poles so that your elbow is as close to 90 degrees as possible. Doesn't have to be exact, but as close as possible. You want the arms to be relatively neutral. And from here, actually, let me turn sideways. From here, we're going to revisit our 4-point grounding. You're thinking about all 10 toes and both heels pressing down deep into the ground, almost like you're growing roots into the floor. You're pressing the floor away from you. And then you're thinking about your two arms. You're thinking about the entire length of the arms pressing down into the pole. So not just the wrist, not just the hand. You're thinking about the entire length of the arms pressing down into the poles in order to increase your upright posture. This is our 4-point grounding we did earlier in sitting. We're just revisiting it in standing. And from here, the first thing we're going to do while maintaining our 4-point grounding is we're going to weight shift forward and back. So you bring your weight to the fronts of your feet and then to the back of your feet. And you're using your poles to help you stay balanced, but we're not leaning on the poles. We want to think of pressing the entire length. So remember, the entire length of the arms down into the poles as we're doing our forward and back weight shift. And you'll notice my body kind of looks like an inverted pendulum. So I'm not doing this, right, with my knees or my hips. I'm keeping myself in a straight plank position, and I'm using my weight shift that we did earlier, the weight shift of forward and backwards, and pressing the entire length of the arms down into the poles to keep me balanced. And I'm pressing my weight forward and then back. Only as far as you can without losing your balance. Keep going. I'm just going to change the audio here on someone's computer. Okay, keep going. Nicely done, everyone. And I'm going to turn to face you. We're going to stop for a second. We're going to do the same thing, except we're going to go side to side. So we're weight shifting side to side. And again, we're not doing this, right? We don't want the hips to go. We want the body to stay in one straight line. So you're thinking about the body in one plane. The entire body is moving together. And we're still thinking about pressing the entire length of the arms down into the poles, such that you're growing taller, crown of the head reaching for the ceiling. Long necks as we weight shift side to side. Nicely done, everyone. Really feel the 4-point grounding. And in fact, you should feel actually a little bit tired from this because we are engaging as many muscles as we can, pressing the entire length of the arms down into the poles. And we're going to find our neutral again. We're going to find our center where our poles are perpendicular to the floor. And we're going to go into our forward lunge. So we're lunging and coming backwards. Let me move sideways so you can see me. I'm lunging and coming back. Lunging and coming back. But your lunge, you're stepping out far enough that it's almost like you're about to kneel on the floor with your back leg, but not quite. And you actually don't have to step out that far if you're not able to. You can also take a step And I'm doing opposite arm to leg. You can take a step if you like, or you can do the full lunge, whichever version works better for you. But while you're doing this, I'm going to invite you to really think about that 4-point grounding. Both feet digging down into the ground and both toes pressing down into the floor. You're growing taller, even though your height is getting smaller because you're lunging. You're still thinking about the crown of the head reaching for the ceiling. You're thinking about pressing deep into the ground in order to grow taller. Nicely done, everyone. Keep going. Let's do 4, 3, 2, last one, and rest. You can shake out the legs, shake out the arms if you need. Nicely done, everyone. Okay, we are going to move on to our sideways squat or lateral squats. So again, we want the poles to be perpendicular to the ground. We don't want it to be on an angle in any way. You want it to be perpendicular to the ground if you can. And what we're going to do here is we are now going to step out to the side into a lunge like so. So you're bending the knee, but you're going out to the side with, and then you're using that same leg to push yourself back to the middle. Same to the other side, stepping out and a big push to come back to the middle. When I say push, I don't mean just with the arms, but I mean with the leg as well. We're thinking about pushing the floor away from you to propel you back to the middle. Push away. Push. Nicely done. Stepping out to the side and push to come back to the middle. Stepping out to the side, push to come back to the middle. Push to come back to the middle. Nicely done. Push to come back to the middle. Good, nicely done. See if you can step out a little bit further, just an inch. Back to the middle. Good. You're still thinking about your 4-point grounding, pressing into the ground as you're doing this. Last 4, 3, 2, last 1, and rest. Okay, grab some water if you need. Take a quick break if you need. You can shake your legs, shake your arms out, grab a quick sip of water, and then we are going to come back. I want to make sure everyone's volumes are still working. I know there was a comment earlier about the audio not being too clear, so hopefully you can hear me. I can see you all moving, so I assume so. Okay. Right, so once we've had your quick sip of water, we're going to come back. We're going to hold the poles together now, and we're going to make sure our hands are slightly wider than our shoulder width. So you can see my hands are slightly open. And I'm going to bring my arms up in front of me, and I'm going to go into our marching. We're thinking about hiking the knees up as high as we can towards the poles. And as we're doing this, we're thinking about growing taller to the ceiling. We don't want to be down here. We want to be up here, like you're bringing your knee up towards your chest. You're thinking about the crown of your head reaching to the ceiling. And then to take it one step further, you have the option to travel forward as you're doing this, and then travel back as you're doing this. Just be careful you're not going to trip on anything. I don't want anyone to fall. So just check your surroundings. Don't trip over your cat, your dog, your spouse. Be careful. But you're going to travel forward and backward as your space allows. Nicely done. Keep going, arms up this time. Keep going, forward and back, arms up towards the ceiling. Last variation. We're gonna dig the arms down to the side, almost like you're kayaking, but with really wide arms. Traveling forward and back if you can. Again, be careful of your furniture. Don't knock paintings off the wall, put holes in the wall, be careful. And rest, shake out those legs, well done. As you can probably see, we're doing lots of leg heavy variations today. Okay, so we are now going to hold on to our poles in the middle. So you can see here, if I move this for a second. I'm not holding the handle, but can you see I'm kind of holding the middle of the entire length of the poles? And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go into a bit of a squat. Let me turn sideways. So I'm holding onto the poles relatively in the middle. And I'm going to squat down. I'm going to send my hips back and squat down such that it's almost like I'm about to sit in a chair. And can you see my elbows are roughly 90 degrees? We're going to hold the squat position. Join me here. Hold that squat. And we're going to go into a reverse fly with our arms. I'm bringing the arm back. I'm thinking about squeezing my shoulder blades back. The entire length of the pole is going back behind me. Squeezing the shoulder blades together, one arm at a time. Almost like you're opening a car door. Maintain your squat, sneak your bottom back. Last 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Squat a little lower. Both hands for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and rest. Shake out those legs. Well done, everyone, and shake out those arms. How are we doing? Are we okay? Okay. So we are going to continue on with our leg variation. So what we're going to do here is we are going to bring our arms a little bit wider than our shoulder width, and we want to make sure the pole again is perpendicular to the ground. So we don't want it to be on an angle like that. We want the pole to be vertical, straight up and down, and perpendicular to the floor. From here, we are going to go into a reverse lunge directly behind us like so. Standing back up, that same leg is now going to go behind into a curtsy lunge. So from the side, I'll show you. I'm going back. That same leg is going across on a diagonal like a curtsy. And then same on the other side. Directly behind and then on a diagonal. And then switch legs again. Directly behind on a diagonal. Directly behind on a diagonal. Good, nicely done. Keep going. And you're pressing down the entire length of your arms into the poles. Directly behind. And you'll notice as I'm doing this, can you see my torso is straight up and down? I'm not like this. We don't want to be leaning into the poles. We want to imagine our trunk is like an elevator. I can only go up and down, but not forwards and back. Okay, so trunk like an elevator. Your trunk can go up and down, but not forwards and back. So don't lean into the pole like that because you'll hurt your shoulder. So make sure you're nice and nice and tall through the trunk. And hopefully you didn't just hit your back wall like I did. Nicely done, everyone. Remember, you don't have to follow my pace. You're more than welcome to slow it down. Let's do last 6. Last 5. Last 4. Last 3. Last 2. Last 1. And rest. Shake out those legs. Oh my goodness, well done. Okay. We're gonna stand up nice and tall again with the arms out to the side, a little bit wider this time. And we're gonna just go into our leg swings. So nice and loose, loosey-goosey, nice and soft. Nice wiggly kind of quality. Imagine overcooked spaghetti kind of quality. But let the leg be nice and loose. We're gonna open up the hip here by swinging our leg. You can hold on to a wall if that makes you feel a little more steady, or you can press down into your pose, whatever is easier. We're going nice and loose, like overcooked spaghetti quality, loosey-goosey with that leg. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Loosey-goosey with that leg, think overcooked spaghetti, way overcooked spaghetti. Loosey-goosey, don't hold anything. We're not contracting anything and sustaining that contraction. We're just letting gravity and momentum kind of take over. Let the leg be floppy. Good, nicely done. Now one leg forward, one leg behind. The back leg is straight, the front leg is bent. We're thinking about digging that back heel down into the ground. Keep that back knee straight, so you should feel a stretch in the back calf muscle. If you're not able to straighten that back knee at all, maybe bring that leg in a little bit more. Or if your heel is completely on the floor and your knee is straight and you're not feeling the stretch, you might need to walk that leg back. Nicely done. Let's switch sides. Same thing here. You're thinking about straightening that back knee, digging that back heel down into the ground. Nicely done. And coming back up. Let's do a thigh stretch. You can hold on to your poles together, like so if you like, or a wall, whatever works for you. There's 2 options here. You can either hold on to your foot, pull it up towards your bottom, keep your knees in one line and push your hips forward to feel that stretch. Or if you're not able to do that, you can grab a chair and put it behind you, and you can put the leg onto the chair, keep your knees in one line, stick your hips forward, and you'll feel that stretch all the same. The higher the seat of the chair, the more of a stretch you'll feel, but you can do whichever version works for you. Breathing as we're doing this, pushing the hips forward. Nicely done. And release. Same on the other side. You can either hold that foot and pull it towards your bottom, keep the knees in one line, or you can place your foot onto a chair, whatever works for you, but you're still keeping your knees in one line and pushing the hips forward. Nicely done, everyone. Breathing. And release. I'm going to move the chair out of the way. Holding our poles in front of us like so. Nice wide stance. I'm going to open my arms back like so, letting my gaze follow, almost like you're opening a door. And bring that pull towards that back wall. Nice rotation in the spine as you're doing this. Letting your gaze follow to deepen that stretch a little bit. Oops, I just whacked my wall again. Last 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and rest. Last little bit of a balance check. Standing nice and tall, pulls perpendicular to the floor. We're gonna lift one leg off the floor. And you're gonna lift the opposite arm up off the floor if you can. And then do the same thing on the other side, lifting your leg, opposite arm up. And down again. We'll keep alternating here. If you want a bit of an added challenge, see if you can close your eyes. As you're doing this, really think about pressing the entire length of the arm down into the floor. Thinking about that tall posture, you're pushing the floor away from you in order to grow taller. You're fine to start with your eyes closed. You don't have to do that, but you can. Last 4, 3, 2, 1, and rest. Pulls together, nice wide arms. Reaching up overhead. And we're going to go down into a side stretch. Think about your breastbone moving to the side, not just the arms. And come back up to the middle. Reach to the ceiling, lengthen even more. And then over to the other side. One more side, reaching up to the middle, grow even taller. Over to one side. Make sure it's not just the arms, you're thinking about your chest. Up to the middle, growing one more time, and last time to the other side. And relax. Pulls apart, feet pressing down into the ground. Close your eyes for a moment. We're going to revisit our 4-point grounding. Keeping your eyes closed, we're going to feel the soles of our feet pressing down into the ground. We're thinking about spreading all 10 toes deep into the earth. The heels digging down into the ground. Pressing growing roots into the earth through your feet. Maintaining that, you're going to press the entire length of your arms down into the poles, not just the handle, but the entire length of your arms. Pressing down in towards the ground, almost like gravity is really weighing down the entire arm. And therefore you're pressing, digging the poles deeper into the ground. And as you're grounding both feet and poles deep into the earth, you're growing taller as a result of you pressing, growing roots deep into the ground, pushing down to go up. And then when you're ready, you're going to relax. Find your steady stance, find your balance in this position with your eyes closed, with your arms relaxed on the poles, and your feet relaxed. You're not thinking about growing roots into the ground anymore. You're just standing and appreciating how your body feels after some movement. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Thank you very much for joining me today for week 2 of exercising with Fold. I hope you found that enjoyable, and I hope to see you again next week. Thank you, everyone. I hope you're feeling a little sore in the nicest way possible. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.